Norobod was strict, extremely strict with the servants, except for Sergei, whom he trusted completely and who supported his every decision unconditionally. Immersed in my work, I cared little about what they did to the families who worked for us and to the casual servants who arrived daily for work. I noticed Sasha was very lively in the afternoons. When the moujiks returned from work, she would sit at the door to watch the miserable peasants. Passing by, it was her favorite distraction. Then her eyes met those of the boy, whose name I didn't know. Their interest grew to the point of breaking with the social class that separated them from each other. But for the heart, doctor, when love is sincere, this barrier disappears. That was the case with Sasha. She was in love with the moujik. Her father could never know, because if he did, he would punish them severely. He would never allow a moujik to dare look at his daughter. This was my little doll's drama. The two began to look at each other, secretly, for long months, daily, until a love so great blossomed between them that they began to meet secretly in the abandoned hut in the enclosure, where Sumarokov now lives with his family. One day, at the harvest festival, a local custom where servants and masters gather to celebrate the harvest, the enamored oxysil was already eager to see each other. No one yet suspected their relationship, which took place at night in the greatest secrecy. However, a mother's heart reveals all. I felt sorry for my daughter, but she avoided telling me her problem, fearing retaliation from me. She lived her drama alone, perhaps sharing it with her pillow, until one day she became pregnant by her boyfriend and was already promised in marriage to the Count's son. It was the end if her father discovered her secret. It would be the death of her and the boy. Sergei eventually discovered the affair, and the dangerous news of their affair reached the master. Nastasia, her maid, learned of the affair and rushed to warn her of the danger they both faced. In immense pain, she begged her boyfriend to flee the farm immediately. The lovers thought no one knew about their nocturnal escapades. Her pregnancy was advanced, and she needed to escape too. She could never tell anyone about it. They both agreed to run away at night and live somewhere, where they would look for work, and she would disguise herself. They hatched a plan to disappear and meet far from the farm. He would run away first to prepare a place, and then return to warn her. They devised the best possible plan, studying every possibility, meeting time and location. They would meet in the city when she was going on a trip to buy some clothes for her trousseau, as her father had set her wedding for the following year. Her pregnancy was beginning to show, and she had gained weight. They had decided to escape during the harvest festival. They would take advantage of the time when everyone was drunk and relax their vigilance. The young moujik evaded the vigilance and managed to escape, despite the dogs barking. The guards warned him, but it was useless. The young man had disappeared without a trace. Hours later, I heard Norobod and Sergei talking angrily. "How did you let this happen, Sergei? Don't you have enough men at the borders?" The poor wretch was smarter than I thought. He even managed to avoid the dogs. It was common for a moujik or two to flee the lands of Norobod. Few young men subjected themselves to the harsh regime and humiliation. There were several reasons for them to abandon their lands. Those who stayed were the worst, the laziest, or the old, tired, and without the strength to change their situation. Put new men on the borders, Sergei. Everyone who knows a fugitive must search for him until death. I want him dead or alive. I will exact my revenge alive, and if dead, I want him dead. Raise it in a great bonfire, so that no one else dares to look at a Norobod without my permission. The order, immediately obeyed, left no doubt. The poor young man was already doomed. The other servants had seen the worst things happen, for example, and didn't dare run away or squander their labor. Days later, they found a young man and, thinking he was a fugitive, brutally tortured him. The servant, disfigured by blood, was thrown into the courtyard, already unconscious. Sasha had known everything. Her expression was one of pure grief. She had only escaped death because God's mercy was with us. When she rested her golden head on my shoulder and her soft hair touched my face, I realized how much she was trembling and carried her to bed before they set fire to the boy, who was certainly still alive. Her father forced her to watch the incineration. My poor little girl screamed in despair. Unable to bear the pain of seeing her beloved dying there, charred to death, she fainted and when I unbuttoned her nightgown, I realized she was pregnant. I was terrified. If Norobod discovered her pregnancy, it would be the end of my daughter. He would never forgive her. My little girl and I became closer than ever. We would do anything to keep my husband from finding out about her pregnancy. We feared for her and the child. Even if it were his grandson, he certainly wouldn't hesitate to have them killed without mercy. Nothing could restore the life of her beloved, whom everyone assumed, based on the descriptions, was the murdered young man. All she could do was fight for her son and his survival. "Mama Cha, why don't you go far away from here?" she asked me bitterly. "We have no way to leave the farm. Sasha, we have to wait for the harvest festival. By then, Mama Cha, my son should have been born." I couldn't abandon her. She was weak, very weak, and suffering from the boy's disappearance, crying constantly. She had lost so much weight that her body looked more like that of a young girl than a pregnant woman. Feeling sorry for her situation, we tried every possible way to make plans, try to find a solution. I appealed to Alex, who was living in St. Petersburg at the time. He could take his sister to spend a few days with him and his wife. Surely, my son would understand his only sister's plight. Away from his father, Alex would help her. It was the only solution. Another month, and Sasha would no longer be able to hide her pregnancy. I sent an emissary with a letter to Alex, asking him to come to the farm urgently. Unfortunately, when the letter arrived, Alex was traveling with his wife and young daughter, visiting a relative in northern Asia. Things got worse. If Norobod had suspected the true situation, we would both have been lost. He barely saw her. Sasha, with my help, wrapped her stomach in bandages to hide it from everyone. Only Nastasia, the kind servant, and I knew the truth. By the next harvest, the baby would be born. Fortunately, Norobod, completely absorbed in his work with the henchmen and the sale the farms produce, had forgotten about us. Traders were constantly coming and going daily. We barely saw him, and when he did settle down, it was night, and Sasha was already asleep. On the eve of the harvest, when Sasha was about to give birth, her father heard her moans, burst into his daughter's room, saw what was happening under his nose, and didn't forgive. He lashed her coldly. I couldn't resist. My maternal instincts took over, and I rushed at him to defend her, but I felt only his heavy hand on my skull and fell unconscious, unable to get up. When I woke, one of the servants was at my side, wiping the blood from the wound. Frightened, I asked for Sasha. It was painful to see the girl. Norobod forbade me from seeing her. He had been drinking. It was then that I learned of Norobod's unfortunate order to kill our own grandson. With great difficulty, I managed to cross the hallway and enter Sasha's room, where she was unconscious, about to give birth, bringing the date forward. Nastasia delivered the baby while I stayed outside guarding the door, afraid that Norobod would arrive. It was night. The dim lighting helped to disguise it. I heard crying. Anxiously, I went into the room and asked. "My grandson was born?" "A granddaughter, madam." Nastasia replied, distressed. "Keep watching, madam. We are in danger." I went back to the door to watch the corridor, but first I said to the noble nurse, "Nastasia, take the child and run." I ordered, without thinking about anything else. Knowing my husband, I fear the worst. I looked inside and had time to see a figure picking up the child, while Nastasia packed a bundle and ran after him. The woman feared for the child's fate if Norobod saw her. So, without a second thought to the consequences, she fled in a wagon. The dogs barked, and some men followed her in the middle of the night. After that, she heard nothing more. Sadly, Nastasia was found dead, along with a bundle of clothes, which they assumed was a newborn. A mujik's wife told me that there was no sign of a child in the bundle. The cart was found hitched to animals and wandering near an abandoned hut. Nastasia's barbaric death left us depressed, because she was our last hope. Norobod swore to persecute anyone involved in that affair. He would have preferred to kill me, because 2 days later, while the servants were celebrating the harvest, Sasha responded to her father's mistreatment with a violent hemorrhage and succumbed to the emotion of the tragic events. Mrs. Norobod, when she finished her depressing narrative, had no tears left on her face, only an infinite sadness in her eyes. Neighbor didn't know what to say. He looked at her fearfully. "One thank you, Mrs. Norobod, for confiding these events to me. I never heard who helped the nanny or anything about your granddaughter's whereabouts. Never. When Alex arrived from his trip, I asked him to look for her. All in vain, Doctor. It seems the earth swallowed her that sad night. Heaven made a point of hiding any memory of my daughter. What was the point? I don't even know if they killed my granddaughter or not. But your daughter insists on not being forgotten. Neighbor was referring to the spirit. Norobod saw her often, and her ghost drove him deeper into drink, leading to complete madness. I think that was not enough of the harm he caused, he said, bitterly and without remorse. A deep silence fell between them, which Mrs. Norobod broke by asking him, "What use, Doctor, will my sad memories have for your study? How can you help my Sasha, since she can no longer return to us from where she is?" Who said she couldn't return if she hadn't already left? I don't understand you. The dead return, and how they do. Mrs. Norobod, your daughter continues to feel alive, in flesh and blood, and her spirit suffers because of this. The divine spark of which we are all made is indestructible. It never dies. She needs to find peace, and that is why I have come. Confident within me, I beg you, let me act. Okay, Doctor, you will have my full support from now on. Do as you wish. You don't know how grateful I am for your trust. This is a first step towards eradicating the evil that has taken hold in this place. At this moment, Karina interrupted them, offering them fruit and bread on a rich silver tray. The wizard began to savor them, while Mrs. Norobod looked at him with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Everyone eagerly awaited a magical touch from the wizard, who now lived at Mrs. Norobod's expense. They hoped he would materialize the spirit, or rather, bring it back to life. But nothing happened. Neighbor continued his research and observations, because making a spirit materialize was no easy task. Everything depended on the spirit's will, on its acquiescence. Sasha and Nicholas were always chasing him, trying in vain to discover his secrets. The two youngsters eventually gave up on this fascinating game because, to them, the wizard neighbor was just a studious man, full of methods, always appearing contemplative. They eventually agreed that he, in fact, possessed no special powers. 28. The proposal. The monotony of the place was broken with the arrival of new characters on the farm. They were Olga and Nicholas, Sumarokov's aunt and uncle, who, longing for him, came to visit him in their best troika. Time had passed, and Uncle Nicholas's head was as white as snow. They came with one goal, to take Sumarokov and his family to their land. The dogs barked at the horses, making a lot of noise, and Sumarokov greeted him at the entrance with great celebration. The new master granted him this privilege. He could easily welcome his uncles into his izba. There was no longer any fear among the employees. Much had changed with Norobod's death. Alex was completely different, running the farm with kindness, and everything was prospering, the employees less unhappy. They had begun construction of a small school to serve the children of moujiks who wanted to study. Sergei continued to work, still practicing his evil in secret, against the occasional rebellious employee. He was about to abandon the farm and take over the land, which would guarantee him a comfortable life until the end. Alex didn't yet know that a little over half of the land left by his father didn't belong to him, and Sergei was its rightful owner. Sergei was recruiting henchmen who aligned with his ideas before moving permanently onto his property. He despised the little Thai who had taken Norobod's place and criticized his ideas. He formed a group of men, just as malicious as he was, who waited, after the changes, to get their share of land. The men commanded by Sergio were mostly fugitives and criminals. The foreman established a separate regime on the farm, one of violence and cruelty. It was under these circumstances that Sumarokov's uncles arrived. They found an atmosphere of intrigue and remnants of cruelty toward the poor. The farm prospered thanks to the crops and the sincere joy of some serfs who, when treated kindly, visibly changed and sought to do their best. The aunt and uncle came in, chatting happily. Everything had changed in those long years. They were surprised to find Aunt and sons handsome, well-dressed, and well-mannered young men. They didn't even look like peasants. Aunt Olga's greatest joy was finding Katienka doing the same work. The two women hugged, happy to see each other again. "You haven't changed at all, Katienka. You're still beautiful and young." Katienka couldn't say the same to the elderly woman who hugged her and simply smiled. Is this Katienka, the young woman you mentioned, Olga, the one who took over the house of Sumarokov and his children? It's this one, Nicholas, the girl I told you about. Ah, if it weren't for this girl's help, I don't know what would become of us. In those difficult times when our poor Anna—" The old woman began to cry, remembering those difficult days for everyone. "Where are Christian and Mayra?" "They're studying," replied Sumarokov, who had left his work for a moment to attend his uncle's, emotionally recalling those difficult times when he believed he would never be able to cope without his Anna. "Studying." Uncle Nicolau changed the subject, as soon everyone would be crying again over Arma's death. "Yes, uncles, things are very different here. Look at this wooden building we're building. It's a school." Sumarokov left the Izba and showed him a building a few meters away, quite advanced, where he was currently working with a few other men. "It's an order from the new boss, Alex." While her nephew and uncle went to the construction site, Olga turned to Katlenka. "And you, Katlenka, what do you say?" The girl blushed and lowered her head shyly. I'm fine." Aunt Olga, a great psychologist, sensed that something was still unresolved. After all, were she and her nephew together, or was their relationship still just companionship? She began dropping hints to understand their situation. They were determined to take Sumarokov to their farm. This was the main purpose of their visit. Embarrassed, Katlenka evaded her. The two returned to talking about Sumarokov's children. "What time do they come back?" "It's close. It won't be long. Then you'll see how they've grown." "I'm looking forward to seeing you," she said, then confessed. "Katlenka, we've come especially to take you to our estate. Nicholas is old and can no longer manage his business. We have no children. The only one we had died. The servants are becoming more and more annoying every day, and their work is worth little. Now, with the organizations that aim to eliminate the large landowners, no one has any peace. In our area, there is much fighting and confusion, and labor is becoming increasingly scarce. Sumarokov is a hard worker, and when we die, he will inherit our land. To whom will we leave it after all?" Katlenka listened attentively to the woman, then began to speak as if she herself were part of the problem. "I know, Mrs. Olga, how much you love your nephew. Sumarokov truly is a worthy and hard-working man. He deserves a chance. He works hard on construction projects, spends his youth improving other people's property, and builds nothing for his own future." The girl spoke as a wife, not a servant. Aunt Olga began to imagine that there was another kind of relationship between them, meant or she was mistaken. "It's a good thing my nephew found a good maiden to live with. Do you remember Katienka, his suffering when poor Arma died? God heard my prayers." The girl noticed the woman's imagination and quickly corrected the situation, explaining to her with an awkward smile and very red. No, Mrs. Olga. Mr. Sumarokov is just my boss." Aunt Olga, a practical, cheerful woman, opened her eyes wide at the girl. "Don't tell me, Katienka, that you've been here all this time, taking care of him and his children, and yet you're not living as husband and wife? What is this idiot nephew of mine waiting for everything to fall apart?" Katienka could not keep a straight face and began to laugh at the woman, at her astonishment and her interesting conjectures. While Katienka prepared some bread and boiled some broth to offer to her aunt and uncle and the children upon their return, the two happily continued their conversation, which didn't displease Katienka, especially since she thought it was an insult that nothing had happened between her and Sumarokov. She secretly loved him, but she thought he only thought of his dead wife, and despite all these years, she continued to patiently respect Anna's memory. Olga, however, was not satisfied with the situation and considered Sumarokov slow, wasting so much time, growing old without having proposed marriage to Katienka. After all, she had left her family to follow him, willing to care for the children. How had he not yet realized the sincere love Katienka had for him? A matchmaker, accustomed to pushing and nurturing shy young men and women into marriage. She felt like the saint of couples, ready to help them both. When the children arrived, there was a tremendous uproar. Mayra and Christian, although they had heard of those cheerful country uncles, considered them strangers and assumed, from their conversations, that they were younger. After a few moments of playing and introducing themselves, the boys had already gotten used to their uncles who, in fact, replace the grandparents they had never met. Olga, no matter how much she searched for a trace of her family in Mayra, found nothing. Who exactly does this girl look like, Iulián? I don't know, Aunt. Maybe it has some trace of Arma's family. Christian, however, is the spitting image of Arma. No one doubts that. It seems that when she gave birth to him, she placed her face and her gaze on him, so that no one would ever forget her. It's true, Aunt Olga. Of all of them, he's the one who most resembles her. Olga took advantage of this intimacy and began to work on her plan to unite him with Katienka. You didn't listen to your aunt's advice. What advice? I don't remember. Do you remember, Iulián, when we were returning from your house, I asked you not to spend too much time mourning? Yes, I remember. I was so confused and hurt by my Anachka, Esperuta, that, to this day, I can confess to you, after so much time, I haven't found a woman to replace her. And because you don't know how to look around you. What do you mean? He pretended to be naive, knowing where his aunt was going with this. Don't tell me you haven't noticed all this time. Olga mischievously completed her matchmaking tactic. Iulián, acting more naive and unnoticed, wanted to confirm his aunt's ideas, asked jokingly, "Who are you talking about, Aunt? I don't see anyone around me." No, men like you truly deserve solitude. Iulián, don't be foolish. Are you blind? See the exquisite, rare jewel you have in your home. Are you waiting for someone else to get it before you? Now it was Iulián Sumarokov who turned red and embarrassed. Knowing that his aunt was talking about his children's nurse, he said, annoyed but cheerful, "Auntie, Katienka is too young for me." "Ah, that's no excuse, Iulián. I know many cases of younger women who get along well with older men. You're not that old, and you've already wasted a lot of time. How long has it been since our Anachka left? A decade? Christian, my youngest, is this age. So many years have passed. It's a long time, my son, to endure such loneliness." The conversation was interrupted by the entrance of the boys, who were coming in from a yard, playing with their uncle. Nicholas, excited about a grandfather they now knew, Katienka too, was full of joy. Entering the house, she went straight to the stove and said, "Let's go for tea, bread, boiled potatoes." 29 Iulián enamorado. Sumarokov looked at Katienka, cheerful and relaxed. She seemed as young as her children, a charming creature. Her blue eyes searched her anxiously. Aunt Olga pretended not to notice. Pleased with the subtle development of their courtship, she left, leaving them to their own devices. It was very difficult for the peasant to confess his feelings to the girl after all those years of intimate acquaintance and respect. His aunt's words only ignited in him a burning need to confess his feelings to her. This was his last chance, and he had to embrace her before someone else got there first. Professor Semyon wasted no time. What if he confessed himself first? Katienka might accept him.